This story is called Riconete and Cortilado. Or even Cortadillo. There we go, I read that right. On the confines of Alcudia, between the provinces of Castilla and Andalusia, might be seen a notable house of entertainment for travellers, called the Little Windmill. On one of the hottest days of summer, 2 boys were seen loitering about this place. One was about 14 years of age, and the other might perhaps have attained his 17th year. They were both good-looking, though in a sadly destitute condition. Coats they had none, their trousers were of coarse linen, and for want of better stockings, they were obliged to be contented with their bare skin. It is true that their feet were covered, those of one being carefully bound in straw or rushes, while the shoes of the other were of so peculiar a formation that it would seem the utmost ingenuity of the wearer had been displayed in rendering them more than usually accessible to the elements of air and water. The head of one was partly covered by a scanty cap. The other wore a hat, though without seeming to trouble himself about its deficiency of crown and brim. The scanty remains of a shirt of the colour of chamois leather partly adorned the neck and shoulders of the younger, while his companion had remedied the inconvenience of such a deficiency by the waistband of an old pair of trousers, covered with grease and completely in tatters, which hung suspended from his neck on his breast, and appeared to conceal a small bundle. In this repository of valuables was concealed a pack of cards of a different shape to those generally used, for by reason of their long service the corners were so much worn that they began to assume a circular shape, which had been rendered still more distinct by the application of the scissors, it being found that the circular form was the most durable. Both the youths were much sunburnt, their nails were begrimed with dirt, and their skin could hardly be called clean. One was armed with a broken sword, and the other with a yellow-handled knife, which completed their costume. They sallied from the inn and seated themselves opposite each other, under a sort of covering which serves for a veranda in houses of that description, and the elder, bowing very politely to the other, addressed him with all the air of a man of tone. "If I might take the liberty of addressing a gentleman of your distinguished appearance without the ceremony of introduction, I should inquire what part of the country has the honour of claiming you as a resident, and whither you intend to travel." "Señor Caballero," returned the other, with equal ceremony and politeness, "with respect to your first question, I am sorry that I am unable to satisfy your curiosity, being utterly ignorant of it myself, and, as to the second, I lament that I can afford you as little information, for I really don't know." "Why, truly, sir," said he without the shirt, "if I might give an opinion, you certainly don't look as though you had dropped from heaven, and if you had, I should not think you would choose this place for your descent. Consequently, you must be going somewhere." "That is very just," replied the one with the hat, "and yet I have told you the truth, for my country is no longer mine, my father having turned me out, and as to the future, I must trust to chance, which I dare say will put something in my way by which I may get an honest livelihood." "And pray, may I ask whether you belong to any profession?" said the original querist. "No other," replied the other or younger, "than running like a hare, leaping like a deer, or using a pair of scissors very delicately will fit me for." "That is all very good and useful," said his companion, "for on next Holy Thursday you will find good employment in cutting paper ornaments for the church." "Ah, but my abilities in cutting do not lie that way," said the younger gentleman. "My father, by the blessing of Providence, is a tailor and a shoemaker, and he taught me to cut out antiparas, which, as I dare say you know, are buskins used by men in harvest. I obtained such a proficiency in the art that I might have passed examination as a master, had not my bad fortune deprived me of my employment." "That will happen to the best of us," remarked the elder cavalier, "and I have always heard that the best abilities have always the worst fortune. But I don't doubt a gentleman of your acquirements has some way of bettering his fortune, and if my judgment don't deceive me, you possess some other accomplishments which perhaps your modesty will not allow you to make public." "Why, that is very true," said he of the shirt, laughing, "but as you say, sir, they are not exactly for the public." "Well then," said the other at the instant, "although I consider myself as discreet as most youth, yet, to give you some confidence in me, I will be open with you, and shall expect the same in return, for it is not without reason that fortune has thrown us together, and I'm sure it will be to our loss if we do not become friends. You must know that my name is Pedro De Rincon, and I am a native of Fuenfrida, a place of some note, where my father is a minister of the church. That is to say, he sells the Pope's indulgences, being, as the vulgar call him, the bolero. As I assisted him in his traffic, I acquired such dexterity in making bargains that few could obtain any advantage over me. But observing one day that I was fonder of the money I received than of my business, he put a purse of dollars into my hand and packed me off to Madrid to seek my fortune. Amongst the temptations of the city, the contents of my purse soon vanished, and I found myself at last possessed of more wit than fortune. I applied for assistance to those who had assisted me to spend my money, but it was perfectly astounding to see the want of recollection evinced by these wretches directly I made known my distress. Some positively denied my acquaintance, while others dismissed me with their advice to be more cautious in future. I shrugged my shoulders, but suffered my lot patiently, and turned out to seek my fortune with such readiness that I did not think of providing myself with any luxuries. I took what I thought most necessary from the things which remained to me, and amongst others these cards, at the same time drawing them from their concealment, from which I have managed to derive an honourable subsistence amongst the inns frequented by travellers. I always play at 20 ans, which is a very excellent game for my purpose, and although you see the cards are somewhat the worse for wear, yet I can assure you they possess a marvellous virtue for those who understand them. Indeed, they are become so familiar to me from long acquaintance that I know them as well by the back as by the front. Independently of these advantages, I learned of a certain ambassador a method of handling the cards, by which I am as much at home with their capabilities as you are in the cutting of antiparas. So you see, my honourable sir, that I am in no danger of starving, for let me be in what place I may, there are always persons to be found who are willing to divert themselves with an innocent game, and he who has the least experience is generally the loser. Now, for example, let us look out for a pigeon amongst these carriers within. We will sit down and play as though in earnest, and if anyone wishes to make a third, you will see that he will be the first to lay down his cash." "With all my heart," returned the younger adventurer, "and I feel much indebted for your frankness, in return for which I can do no otherwise than relate in a few words what concerns myself. I am a native of that goodly country situated between Salamanca and Medina del Campo. My father is a tailor, and taught me such good use of the scissors that, instead of cutting clothes, I learned to cut purses. My ambition, however, was not to be limited to the narrow precincts of a country village, and I was already disgusted with the treatment of a mother-in-law. Leaving my home, therefore, I repaired to Toledo, where, giving a free scope to my abilities, I did wonders. There was no rosary, let it be hung ever so carefully, and no pocket, however ingeniously contrived, that my fingers did not visit, or my scissors divide, even though they were guarded by the eyes of Argus. I can assure you that, during the 4 months I resided in that city, I managed to escape all inconveniences. I was never caught between double doors, never taken off my guard, fell not into the hands of the constables, nor became the dupe of an informer. It is now, however, about 8 days since, that a spy of the police gave notice of me to the corregidor, who, being a great admirer of people of talent, expressed an anxious desire to be acquainted with me. My extreme modesty, for which I am remarkable, prevented me that honour, for thinking myself neither by birth nor education qualified to move in such distinguished society, I was obliged to disappoint his worship by withdrawing myself from Toledo. I effected my removal with such haste that I actually did not allow myself time to procure a coach, to provide myself with linen, or indeed any of those conveniences with which gentlemen usually travel, and here I am as you see me." "Really, that was very amusing," said Rincon, grinning. "But now, as we know each other, I think it is time to drop our gentility and confess that we have not anything in the world but what we stand in." "There is no use in mincing the matter," quoth Diego Cortado, for by such name he called himself. "It is even as you say, and since our friendship ought to be lasting, Señor Rincon, I think we should commence it by a proper manifestation of our feelings." And then rising, both the gentlemen embraced each other with great apparent cordiality and goodwill. This little ceremony completing their good understanding, they sat down to play with the above-mentioned cards, having cleaned them from dust and straw, though not from grease and certain deceitful signs, and in a few hands Cortado became as clever at the game as his master Rincon. At this time one of the carriers came out, when seeing the two boys at play, he asked them whether they had any objection to a third, to which they good-naturedly consented. Fortune favoured the boys so well that in less than half an hour the carrier lost 12 reals and 22 maravedis, which, in paying, cost him just as many twinges of regret. The loser, however, seeing his adversaries were only boys, thought he could take his money from them again with impunity. But the one drew his piece of a sword, and the other handled his knife so formidably that had not the carrier's companions come to his succour, it was likely to have gone very ill with him. At this time a troop of people passed on horseback, who, seeing the disturbance between the boys and the carrier, parted them, and told the former they were going to pass the night about a league further, whither, if they pleased, they might accompany them. "We will go with pleasure," said Rincon, "and anything we can do in return we shall be most happy." And, without further invitation, they jumped up on 2 of the mules and set forward with the party, leaving the carrier in no very enviable state of temper. The landlord could not help laughing at the dexterity of the young rogues, for he confessed he had overheard their conversation, and thus learned that the cards were false. At this discovery, the carrier could hardly contain himself for rage. He swore the most formidable oaths, and declared his intention of following the young sharpers and reclaiming his lost pieces. Not that he valued the money, as he said, but from pure shame to think that so great a man as he should be cheated by 2 such very little rogues. His companion, however, endeavoured to pacify him, saying it was much better to abide by the loss than to get laughed at for his simplicity. The 2 companions now congratulated themselves on their good fortune, and made themselves so useful to their fellow travellers that they were allowed to mount behind them the best part of the way, and although many opportunities occurred of exercising their professional abilities with advantage, yet they desisted, from the consideration that they might endanger their journey to Seville, whither they were going. However, on entering the city by the Aduana gate, Cortado was not able to resist the temptation of cutting open the portmanteau of a Frenchman behind whom he was mounted. His knife was handy on all occasions, and he inflicted so grievous a wound on the valise that he presently discovered its contents, and selected from them 2 shirts, a small sundial, and a memorandum book. These things, it is true, were of little value, but they served to replenish their purse, which was now exhausted with 20 reals. Having secured this, they went to view the city, of which they had heard so much. The cathedral excited their admiration, and they were astonished at the great concourse of people on the river. The galleys likewise did not escape their observation, and an involuntary sigh escaped from each, as his thoughts naturally anticipated the time when he might have a closer view of them. They were surprised to see such a number of boys with baskets plying for hire, and they took the opportunity of asking one the nature of his office, whether it was laborious, and what was the gain. It was an Asturian boy of whom they made the inquiry, and he replied that the business was easy enough, that they paid no duty, and that on some days they gained 5 reals, and on others 6, as it might happen, with which they lived the life of a king, free to seek any master that paid them well, and then they enjoyed themselves after their own fashion. This account of the Asturian pleased the 2 friends mightily, for the anticipation of carrying the goods of others seemed highly favourable to their peculiar abilities, and they forthwith determined to purchase the necessary equipment for their new profession. The Asturian told them it would be necessary to buy some small bags and 3 baskets for fish, flesh and fruit, the bags to be used solely for bread, and that when provided with these necessaries they were to attend in the mornings at the flesh market in the square of San Salvador, on fast days at the fish market, and in the evening they were to look for employment at the riverside. This instruction the 2 friends committed to memory, and having purchased what was necessary with the spoils of the Frenchmen, they planted themselves the next morning in the square of San Salvador. They had not been there long before their new baskets attracted the attention of the other boys, who soon flocked round them, anxious to know whence they came, and everything concerning them, to all which the friends gave those answers which might have been expected from young persons of their talent and discretion. At this time a soldier and a student came up, who, liking the cleanliness of the baskets, the former called Rincon, and the student beckoned Cortado. Rincon, by way of commencing his office, bowed very humbly to his employer, and said, "I hope your honour will not forget that I am a beginner." "Never fear," said the soldier. "Your reward shall not be amiss, for I can afford to be liberal. I am going to give a feast today to some friends of my mistress." "Then pray load me as much as you please," returned the youth, "for I have both the will and the strength to carry the whole market, ay, and sugar to season it withal, if such be your honour's pleasure." The soldier was so well pleased with the quickness of the youth that he told him if he desired to quit his present employment he would take him into his service. Rincon replied with many thanks, saying that he was so newly entered on the office he wished to see whether it would turn out well or ill, but in case of failure he should not have the honour of serving so respectable a gentleman, because he had given his word to a priest. The soldier laughed, and gave him a good load, directing him to the house of his mistress, and desiring him to remember it well, as he would have occasion to go there often. He then gave him 3 quartos, and dismissed him. Rincon returned with the utmost speed to the square, lest he should lose an opportunity, for the Asturian had cautioned him to be diligent and trustworthy, although in carrying small fish or such like commodity there was no harm, he said, in taking a little from a quantity which could not be missed, but on no account to take it if there should be the least chance of detection, as credit was the soul of their trade. Cortado returned just about the same time as Rincon, who, showing his companion the 3 quartos, asked him what luck he had met with. Cortado, putting his hand into his breast, drew out a purse which seemed to have been made in times past, but was nevertheless well stocked with money, and said, "His reverence has done me the favour to pay me with this purse, and with these 2 quartos, but take the purse, Rincon, lest his worship may change his mind." Rincon had hardly secreted the purse when back came the student, perspiring at every pore, and in the utmost agitation and perplexity, coming to Cortado. "My good boy," said he, "have you by any chance seen a purse of such and such marks, containing 15 crowns of gold, 3 reals, and so many maravedis in quartos, only wanting the few pieces with which I paid for the meat which you carried?" Cortado replied, without moving a muscle of his countenance, "All I can say to your reverence is that your purse would not have been lost had you taken better care of it." "That is but too true, sinner that I am," returned the student, "for had I taken better care of it, some rascal would never have robbed me." "That is exactly what I think," said Cortado, "but as your reverence knows there is a remedy for all things but death, now I should advise your reverence to avail yourself of the first and principal, which is patience, for it is recommended by God. One day follows another, and he that gives takes away, so in like manner and time may arrive that he who has stolen your purse may repent and restore it, even in better condition than he found it." "That I will excuse," interrupted the student. "For my part," continued Cortado, "I would not be the stealer of the purse for a trifle, for as your reverence is in sacred orders, it is neither more nor less than a sacrilege." "You say right," said the afflicted student, "for though I am no priest, but only the sacristan of a convent, the money I have lost is the third of a chaplain's salary, which is left in my charge, and therefore it is blessed and holy coin." "As you have made your bread, so must you eat it," said Cortado, in a condoling manner, "but the day of judgment will arrive, and then we shall see the rogue who was hardened enough to steal the chaplain's salary. And pray, what might the situation of your friend be worth per annum with regard to salary, Señor Sacristan?" asked Cortado innocently. "Salary of the devil!" returned the sacristan, incensed beyond measure at what appeared to be trifling with him. "Is this a time to talk about salary? Tell me, my friend, do you know anything of the purse? If so, say. If not, God be with you, for I must go and have it cried." "That is the best thing you can do," said Cortado, "and remember," he added, calling after him, "that you are very particular about the description of the purse, and the exact sum contained therein, for if you make the mistake of a single farthing you will never see your purse again in this world. I only say this, sir, by way of advice." "There is no fear of that, my friend," returned the sacristan. "I have it so truly in my memory that I shall not mistake a single thread." Saying this, he drew from his pocket a handkerchief to wipe the perspiration from his countenance, a movement not lost on Cortado, who immediately seemed to take a more vivid interest in the poor man's loss, and suggested several expedients for its recovery. The advice of Cortado was given in so vague a manner that the sacristan was tempted to ask a repetition, during which Cortado, taking advantage of the sacristan's anxiety, contrived to beguile him of his handkerchief, when, with many expressions of condolence, he took his leave, recommending him to use all diligence in the recovery of his property, and then returned to Rincon. "What have you been so busy about with the student?" inquired his companion. "Why, I have been listening to the poor gentleman's distress, which I protest has so affected me that I was under the necessity of borrowing his handkerchief," replied the young wag, at the same time producing it and applying it to his eyes. The two young rogues then indulged in some merriment at the expense of the poor sacristan, but Cortado had not effected the latter transfer so secretly as to escape the observation of a lad who had been watching him. "Pray, gentlemen," said he, advancing towards them, "may I ask of what profession you call yourselves?" "We don't understand you, sir," replied Rincon. "I ask you, gentlemen, whether you are from Murcia?" repeated the youth. "Neither from Murcia nor from Thebes," responded Cortado, "and if you have nothing further to say, I wish you a good morning." "You don't choose to understand me, eh, my masters?" said the querist. "But I think I could soon make you understand. Ay, and teach you to eat out of a spoon. What I wish to ask of you, gentlemen, is merely whether your honours are thieves or no, although it is a useless question because I already see that you are, but I must inquire with more reason whether you have paid your footing to the Señor Monipodio." "Do thieves pay taxes in this country, my fair sir?" asked Rincon. "If they do not actually pay, at least they are registered by the Señor Monipodio, who is their father and their master. Therefore I should counsel you to come with me for that purpose, or perhaps you will have cause to repent it." "I always thought," said Cortado, "that thieving was a free trade, without any duty or impost, and if the professors paid at all, it was only at the stocks or over the back and shoulders. But as every country has its own peculiar regulations, so we shall be happy to conform to yours, if we might make bold to ask a gentleman of your respectable appearance to guide us to the abode of the worthy cavalier of whom you speak, where we will prove our proficiency in the science." "That is well," said the other, "and you will see how well qualified our master is for his situation. Why, during the 4 years he has had charge of us, not more than 4 have suffered the capital punishment. But come along, and on the road I will explain to you a little of our vocabulary, which it will be necessary for you to know. During this walk, which was not very short, their new acquaintance instructed them in the language of the craft, very much to the edification of the novice. "And pray, sir," asked Rincon, "may I venture to inquire whether you are a thief yourself?" "Yes, sir. That is to say, by the blessing of God and the prayers of good people, I hope I shall be, although I am not yet out of my novitiate." "Well," said Cortado, "you will excuse me for the remark, but although I have seen and heard a good deal, I never yet heard of thieving by the grace of God and the prayers of the good people." "Sir," replied the guide, "I am no theologian, and therefore cannot argue on the subject. But this I know, that everybody ought to praise God in the vocation to which Providence has been pleased to call him, and the more so as our master Monipodio has expressly ordered it." "Doubtless that gentleman must be of a very religious turn," said Rincon, "since he makes his thieves praise God." "He is the most exemplary man of our profession," returned the youth. "He orders that a part of everything which is stolen shall be set apart to buy oil for the lamp of an image in the city, which is possessed of marvellous virtue. Indeed, we have all seen the good effects of it. For it was but the other day, when a friend of ours was condemned to punishment for stealing 2 asses, and he bore it without a single cry, as though it was nothing, which can only be attributed to our regular devotion. And you must know that some of our club are so particular that they will not steal on a Friday, nor hold conversation with any woman on a Sabbath whose name is Mary." "Indeed, this is most exemplary conduct," said Cortado. "But pray do not the priests sometimes order these religious persons to make restitution or penance?" "No," returned the other, "because they never go to confession. And if letters of excommunication are taken out against them, they are not likely to know it, because they never go to church during the time they are read, excepting indeed at the great holiday, when the crowd of people gathered there makes it a matter of business." "Pious rogues!" ejaculated Rincon. "And what is the harm of it?" cried the other. "Is it not much worse to be a heretic, or to murder your father and mother?" "Why, that is certainly very bad," said Rincon, "but as fortune is so kind as to allow us to be of this respectable fraternity, I must beg you, sir, to quicken your pace, for I am dying to see our respectable friend Monipodio, of whose virtues you have said so much." "Your praiseworthy impatience shall soon be gratified, for we are already arrived. But you must wait a while at the portal, while I go within to see whether he is at leisure, for this is the hour he usually gives audience." The companions had just time to survey the house, which was not of the most promising appearance, when their guide reappeared and called them in. They entered a small courtyard paved with fanciful brickwork of a bright red colour. On one side was a bench with 3 legs, and on the other a broken jar, placed on a stand in not much better condition. In another place was a rush mat, and in the middle was a space for flowers. The boys observed everything attentively, and as the Señor Monipodio did not make his appearance, they took the liberty of entering the lower room which adjoined the courtyard. There they beheld 2 fencing swords, with 2 shields of cork suspended on pegs, a large bow without any case, and 3 more rush mats on the floor. On the front wall was placed an image of the Virgin, of no great merit in its workmanship, under which was seen a small basket and a white basin, serving, as Rincon shrewdly conjectured, the former to receive alms, and the latter for holy water. While they were waiting, there arrived 2 young men about 20 years of age, dressed as students. Shortly afterwards came 2 of their brothers of the basket, and a blind man, who all walked about the open space without speaking a word to each other. Shortly after them came 2 elderly persons in spectacles. They looked grave and respectable, and carried in their hands good-sized rosaries. An old woman next arrived, who immediately on her entrance went to the image of the Virgin, and having taken the holy water with great devotion, prostrated herself before the image. having indulged in this pious occupation some time, she arose, put a small offering into the basket, kissed the floor 3 times, lifted her hands and eyes to heaven, and then rejoined the others in the courtyard. Lastly appeared, to give additional grace to the company, 2 bravos of most sinister aspect, with large whiskers, slouched hats, and ruffled collars. They were armed with enormous swords, several pistols, and targets hanging from their belts. The moment these worthies cast their eyes on the 2 friends, they came to them and inquired whether they belonged to the fraternity. Rincon answered in the affirmative, making great demonstration of respect, which the formidable appearance of the querists seemed to demand. At this moment arrived the long-expected Señor Monipodio, to the great joy of the respectable company assembled. He seemed about 45 years of age, tall of stature, his countenance of a sullen hue, with sunken eyes, eyebrows joined in the centre, and a black bushy beard. He was dressed in a shirt, and covered with a huge cloak reaching to his feet, on which were a pair of old shoes down at the heels. He wore loose trousers of linen, and a hat used by the lowest vagabonds, bell-shaped at the crown, and large in the brim. Across his shoulders was a belt, to which was suspended a short and stout sword. His hands were short, with fat fingers and long nails, and his feet were a pair, but not matched. In short, the appearance of this gentleman, whose reputation had been so strenuously supported, was anything but favourable, he being, unfortunately, one of the most ill-looking barbarians in the world. The youth who had acted as guide to Rincon and his friend now led them forward and presented them to the dignitary, saying, "These are the 2 gentlemen of whom I spoke to your worship. If you please, you can examine them and see whether they are worthy to enter our brotherhood." "That I will do with much pleasure," replied Monipodio, to whom, be it observed, the whole company bowed respectfully on his entrance, except the 2 bravos, who, considering themselves artists of a higher order, merely saluted him by touching their hats. Monipodio, having made the tour of the courtyard to see his visitors, then asked the newcomers their profession, name, and country. Rincon answered that their profession did not need much explanation, and as to the rest it was but of little importance, as such information was never expected from those who were to receive orders of distinction. "You are right, young man," returned the worthy. "It is always proper to conceal such truths. For example, if business did not go well, it would not be very agreeable for your parents to see in the public book that so-and-so son of so-and-so of such a place stood in the pillory or was flogged on such a day for such a theft. No, you are right. And to prevent such inconveniences, everybody ought to have a designation of his own choosing. Therefore, we only require your names." This was complied with by the 2 candidates, when Monipodio said, "It is my pleasure, gentlemen, that henceforward you adopt the names of Riconete and Cortelado, for those which you at present bear, and which, I think, will be quite adapted to your pursuits. It is likewise necessary to make a private communication of the names of your parents, as it is a custom with us once a year to say masses for the souls of those that are no more, which expense is defrayed from the common fund, appropriated for the benefit of the community, such as paying the lawyer who defends us, the priest who advises us, and to reward those our worthy friends who, when a hue and cry is raised after any of our members, appease the losers by telling them that God will punish the wicked." "Those are excellent regulations," said Riconete, who had already accommodated himself to his new appellation. "I cannot sufficiently admire the sagacity of their compiler. But, Señor, our parents have no need of the pious assistance of the Brotherhood, being still in the land of the living. If a change should happily occur, we shall not fail to inform you." "That is well," said Monipodio, who then beckoned the boy who had introduced them. "Ganchoso," said the great man, "are the sentinels placed?" "Yes, sir. There are 3 placed to prevent any surprise." "Very good," returned the professor, "and now let us proceed to business. Riconete, let me hear what are your attainments." "Sir," replied he, "I possess a little spice of art. I can handle cards well, know how to turn an ace to a king, and little manoeuvres of that sort. I know the table of chances better than the 10 Commandments, and have learnt that a stolen guinea is better than a borrowed crown." "That is very good as a beginning," said Monipodio, "but, as you must be aware, these are merely the groundwork of the art. However, with the assistance of a dozen lessons, by the blessing of God, I hope to make you a respectable artist." Riconete bowed, and returned thanks to the master, who called on Cortadillo to state his qualifications. "Sir," said Cortadillo, "I have learnt the rule of arithmetic, which says, put in 2 and take out 5, and I know how to dive into a pocket with ease and safety." "Is that all?" said Monipodio. "That is all, to my misfortune," said Cortadillo. "Never mind," said the professor. "You are in a good school, where doubtless you will soon improve if you follow my instructions." "We have all the desire to improve in everything that touches our art and occupation," replied Riconete. "Very good," said Monipodio. "But I should like to know how you could endure, upon occasion, a dozen lashes without opening your lips, even as much to say, 'This mouth is mine.'" "We are not so misinstructed," said Cortadillo, "as not to know that what the tongue borrows sometimes the throat pays, and heaven have mercy on the poor devil who does not know it is as easy to say no as yes." "That is enough," said Monipodio. "I see you are a youth of talent. I am quite satisfied with you, and shall enter you forthwith on our company as a full member, without serving any novitiate, or paying any duty." The company declared their full approbation of the award of their superior, and complimented the newly elected brother, when one of the sentinels came running in, saying that the alguazil of vagabonds was coming towards the house at full speed. "You need not disturb yourselves," said Monipodio to his friends, some of whom began to evidence signs of embarrassment. "This alguazil is a particular friend of mine, and never comes with any hostile intention. I will presently see what he wants." Everyone was quieted with this intimation, and Monipodio went to the door to speak to his friend, with whom he was some little time in conversation. On his return, he asked who had occupied the square of San Salvador that morning. "I was there," replied the guide. "Then how is it that you have not given notice of a purse which you took there, containing 15 gold crowns, 2 reals, and some quartos?" asked Monipodio. "Why, sir," replied the boy, "the fact is that I have never seen the purse. I have not taken it, worse luck for me, and I cannot imagine who has." "No nonsense with me, sir," said Monipodio. "The purse must and shall be forthcoming. The alguazil is an intimate friend, and has done us a great service." The boy protested in the strongest terms that he had no knowledge of it, when Monipodio began to show symptoms of ire. "No one shall dare to play tricks with me," said he, his eyes sparkling with anger. "Produce the purse or take the consequences." The boy again asserted his innocence, which only increased the master's rage, and excited the feelings of the whole community against the delinquent who had offended against the laws, when Riconete, finding it would be a serious disturbance, consulted a moment with Cortadillo, who thought with him it would be better to appease the anger of Monipodio. Therefore, drawing forth the sacristan's purse, he said, "Calm yourselves, my worthy masters, for here is the purse which the alguazil requires, and likewise a handkerchief which my companion borrowed from the same worthy gentleman this morning." The countenance of the professor immediately brightened at this confession, and he exclaimed, "Cortadillo the good, for by such distinction shall you henceforth be known. Keep the handkerchief, and content yourself this time with having rendered us a signal service, for the sacristan, whose acquaintance you made this morning, is a relative of the alguazil, who is one of our best friends. Therefore we must comply with the proverb which says, 'To him who gives you a fowl, it is not much to send a leg.'" and the alguazil winks at more in a single day that we could compass in 100. Much approbation was manifested by the company at this generous act, and they fully agreed in the justice of the encomium bestowed on Cortadillo, who remained as proud of his title as other worthy and distinguished men who have acquired the like honour from their virtues or other qualities. Before the return of Monipodio, 2 girls entered the apartment, who, from their address and manner, Riconete easily guessed to belong to the community. They were welcomed very warmly by the 2 bravos, Cinquenacque and Marifero, the latter so called from having lost a hand by the course of law, and its place being supplied by one of iron. "Well, what news, my charmer?" said one. "What do you bring for the good of the club?" "You will see directly," replied one of the girls, called Ganacciosa. "Silvatillo is coming." She had hardly spoken these words when a boy entered, bearing a large basket covered with a sheet. The good people seemed all very much delighted with the appearance of Silvatillo, and Monipodio, taking one of the rush mats, placed it in the middle, and invited his friends to place themselves round it. Then, uncovering the basket, which contained abundance of eatables, he desired everyone to carve for himself. There was no want of goodwill in obeying this injunction, and the knives of the guests were put in requisition, Cortelado making use of his scanty sword in lieu of a better and more appropriate weapon. The contents of the basket were soon dispatched, and some elderly gentlemen who were of the party obtained permission to leave, having, as they said, some important business to attend. These reverend members of the community, it appeared, were of the utmost utility, obtaining access by the respectability of their age to houses of consideration, and then ascertaining their value and facilities for plunder, with which they did not fail to acquaint their worthy employer. The meal was scarcely finished before a disturbance was heard within, and one of the scouts came running in to inform them that the justice, followed by a whole posse comitatus, was advancing to the house. In an instant all was confusion. The remains of the feast were scattered on all sides. Bravos and priests, old and young, lame and blind, instantly betook themselves to their different hiding places for refuge, and in an instant the scene of hilarity became as tranquil as though there had been no revellers there at all. Cortadillo and his friend remained, because they knew not whither to fly, and Monipodio, secure in conscious innocence as master of the house, awaited the coming storm. It proved, after all, a groundless alarm. The justice passed on his way to some other quarter, and the runaways were about to be recalled, when a cavalier was introduced, who seemed to be known to Monipodio, who ordered the bravos to be called down, but no others. "How is it," said the cavalier, "that you have not executed my commands?" "I do not know what has been done in the business," replied Monipodio, "but here the artist who had the affair in hand, and I will answer for it he could give you good reason." He then called Cinquenacque to give an account of his commission. "Is it of the merchant in the crossway?" asked the man of office. "The same," said the cavalier. "Ah, I watched for him last night at the very door of his house," rejoined the bravo, "and when he came I looked him full in the face, which I found to be so very small that there was positively not space enough for the 14 slashes that you ordered me to give him. Therefore I could not complete your destruction." "My destruction?" echoed the cavalier, crossing himself. "God forbid! My instructions, I suppose the gentleman means to say." "Yes," said the unperturbed bravo, "that is what I mean. But lest you should say I am not a man of honour, and have neglected my duty, I gave the required number of slashes on the face of his lackey, who, I warrant, can show the marks." "What use is that to me?" said the cavalier. "I had rather that the master had 7 than the lackey 14. However, you will have no more than the money I left, and I will bid you a good morning." Saying this, he took off his hat, and, bowing to the gentleman, was about to leave, when Señor Monipodio caught him by the skirt. Stay, sir, if you please," said he, "and as we have acted honourably in this affair, we shall expect you will do so likewise. There are 20 ducats wanting, which we must have before you leave." "What do you call acting honourably?" said the cavalier. Is it giving the punishment to the man that was intended for the master? His honour forgets the proverb that says, "Love me, love my dog," said Chiquizanque. "And what the devil has that to do with the case?" asked the cavalier. "A great deal," replied the other, "for the same rule, reversed, must be equally true. Therefore, hate me, hate my dog is applicable here, and our conditions are thus honourably fulfilled." "Come, your honour must not split straws with your servants," observed the professor, "but take my advice, and pay what has been honestly earned, and if you are contented to give an order that can be executed on the master, it shall be punctually performed." "If you will do that," said the cavalier, "I'll pay it willingly." "It shall be done as I am a Christian," said the master. "I'll engage that Chiquizanque can make both master and a man so like each other that they shall not be known apart." "Well, with this promise," said the cavalier, "take this chain for the 20 ducats owing, and 40 on account of the business you have in hand. It is worth 1,000 reals, but I shall require no change, as I think I shall have occasion shortly to send you to another friend of mine on the same errand." He then took a handsome gold chain from his neck, which was received with the utmost politeness from Monipodio, and Chiquizanque promised on that very night to wait on the merchant. The cavalier went away very well contented, and the professor then called out the members who were absent, and placing himself in the centre, drew out his book of memorandums, and gave it to Ricontente to read aloud. The first part of the book was an account of the heavy business which had been paid for by their different employers, such as assassinations, slashing in the face with a poniard, maiming, etc. It began thus. Memorandum of the serious business for the week. First, the merchant of the crossway to receive 14 cuts across the face, value 15 crowns, 50 crowns, 30 received on account, to be executed by Chiquizanque. "That is all for this week in that line," said Monipodio. "Go on a few leaves further and see what is to be done under the article of cudgelling." Riconete soon found the place, and found written, "Memorandum for cudgelling. First, the master of the clover-flower eating-house, a dozen stripes of the very best quality, at the rate of 1 crown each. Time allowed, 6 days. To be executed by Maniferro." "You may soon rub that out," said Maniferro, "for this is the last night." "Is there any more, my boy?" asked Monipodio. "Yes, sir," said Riconete. "There is one more. The hunchbacked tailor, commonly called the goldfinch, 6 stripes of the best quality, by order of the lady who left the necklace, to be executed by Desmochado." "I can't think how it is that Desmochado has not completed that order," said Monipodio. "The time has been up these 2 days." "I met him yesterday," said Maniferro, "and he told me the hunchback had been ill and was confined to his house." "Ah, I thought so," returned the master, "for I always esteemed Desmochado a good artist and punctual in his obligations. There is no more, boy. Pass on to common assaults." Riconete found in another page as follows: "Memorandum of common business," such as nailing a horn over the doors of cuckolds, pretences at assassination, false alarms, etc. "That is enough," said Monipodio. "I undertake all that business, because I make it a rule to keep secret little affairs of delicacy, and would rather nail up 20 horns than give intelligence of 1. The business of the day being then concluded, the names of the new members were entered in the book, during which one of the old respectable-looking gentlemen returned, to inform the professor that he had seen the gentleman from Malaga, who informed him that he was so much improved in his art that now he should not be afraid to play with the very devil, and would wager that he could cheat him with clean cards. He had been prevented from waiting on the master since his tour by illness, but should not fail to be at the general rendezvous on Sunday morning. "I always said that Lovillo would arrive at eminence in his profession," said Monipodio. "He has the best hands I ever saw, and to be a good artist we must have good tools." "I have likewise seen the clergyman," said the venerable reporter. "He has taken lodgings in the same house with some people whom he hopes to tempt at play, but he will not fail to attend on Sunday." "Ah, he is a great scoundrel," said Monipodio. I have long had great doubts of his honesty by his never coming near me. Unless he conducts himself more orderly, I shall strip him of his gown. Have you anything more to say? Nothing more at present, returned the old gentleman. There, my children, take these 50 reals amongst you for the present, said the master, and God bless and prosper you in your honest endeavours, and on Sunday next I shall expect everybody present without fail, as I have a lecture to give you on the improvement of our art. He then embraced Riconete and Cortadillo, giving them in charge of their former guide to conduct them to the boundaries of the walks allotted to them, where they were to be accountable for everything stolen from that district. The company then separated, and the two friends retired with their guide, highly edified and delighted with their visit. And that's the end of that little one. It's basically like Oliver, but Spanish. Also, I absolutely butchered half of those names, so apologies to anyone who can speak Spanish. Or just apologies to anyone. And I'm glad you like the Christmas decorations. They are... I could probably have done a little bit more, but have been busy. Do you like... There's one lonely mince pie next to the chair on the stack of books. I was thinking of doing snow out the window, but also then we'd have to find snow sounds, and snow doesn't make any sounds. Excuse me. So, your cousin is snowed in an IKEA. That could not be more Scandi if it tried, could it? Oh dear. I hope he's alright. I hope they're all alright. I assume there's multiple people snowed in. I hope they can... I hope they get lots of meatballs. I guess it's a sort of comfortable place to be snowed in. There are beds and stuff. But yeah. I hope he and anyone else who's snowed in is all right. But yes, I shall take a break. I think I'll only read one more story because yeah, my throat is hurting. But only 6 customers. Oh, okay. Ah, nice. That'll be a great story to tell. I was snowed in an IKEA. Ah, snow pics from home. Oh, of course, yeah. Snow, yay. We had a bit, actually. Oh, sorry. Oh, I promise I'm not that tired. We had some snow a couple of days ago here, actually, which was rather nice. Although English snow is like an inch, if that. So not proper snow. But anyway, yes, I shall take a break, and I hope you can all do the same. Go rotate your fluids, grab a drink, snack, and I will see you back in about 5 minutes. Bye for now. And we're back. Hello everybody. I didn't do a break command. Well, we're not on break anymore, so that didn't happen. But I said all the stuff, so that's okay. I hope everybody has had a nice break. I hope you have done the things you need to do. I hope you have a nice cup of some warm beverage, given that it's cold out there, and have a comfy chair to sit in, or other bit of furniture that's comfortable. I don't know. But yes, I think I shall read just the one more, because my throat is somewhat unhappy. You hung up your laundry. Nice. Productive break. Excellent. Everybody's being very productive. But yes, hope you're all doing well. Yes, I shall read another. This is another story from Spain by Gustavo Adolfo Bequer, or Becker. I don't really know how to pronounce that, but as we have established, I don't seem to know how to pronounce many Spanish words. Excuse me. And this is a little story about an organist, which I thought was quite nice. So this is Maese Perez, the organist. Do you see that man with the scarlet cloak and the white plume in his hat and the gold-embroidered vest? I mean the one just getting out of his litter and going to greet that lady. The one coming along after those 4 pages who are carrying torches. Well, that is the Marquis of Moscoso, lover of the widow, the Countess of Villampida. They say that before he began paying court to her, he had sought the hand of a very wealthy man's daughter, but the girl's father, who they say is a trifle close-fisted, but shh, hush. Speaking of the devil, do you see that man closely wrapped in his cloak coming on foot under the arch of San Felipe? Well, he is the father in question, Everybody in Seville knows him on account of his immense fortune. Look at that group of stately men. They are the 24 knights. Aha, there's that Hemming too. They say that the gentlemen of the Green Cross have not challenged him yet, thanks to his influence with the great ones at Madrid. All he comes to church for is to hear the music. Alas, neighbour, that looks bad. I fear there's going to be a scuffle. I shall take refuge in the church, for according to my guess, there will be more blows than paternosters. Look, the Duke of Alcala's people are coming round the corner of St. Peter's Square, and I think I see the Duke of Medina Sidonia's men in Duenas Alley. Didn't I tell you? There, the blows are beginning. Neighbour, this way before they close the doors. But what's that? They've left off. What's that light? Torches, a litter. It's the bishop himself. God preserve him in his office as many centuries as I desire to live myself. If it were not for him, half Seville would have been burned up by this time by these quarrels of the dukes. Look at them, the hypocrites, how they both press forward to kiss the bishop's ring. But come, neighbour, come into the church before it is packed full. Some nights like this it is so crowded that you could not get in if you were no larger than a grain of wheat. The nuns have a prize in their organist. Other sisterhoods have made Maese Perez magnificent offers. Nothing strange about that, though, for the very archbishop has offered him mountains of gold if he would go to the cathedral. But he would not listen to them. He would sooner die than give up his beloved organ. You don't know Maese Perez? Oh, I forgot you had just come to the neighbourhood. Well, he is a holy man, poor, to be sure, but as charitable as any man that ever lived. With no relative but a daughter, and no friend but the organ, he spends all his time in caring for the one and repairing the other. The organ is an old affair, you must know, but that makes no difference to him. He handles it so that its tone is a wonder. How does he know it? And all by touch, too, for did I tell you that the poor man was born blind? Humble, too, as the very stones, he always says that he is only a poor convent organist, when the fact is he could give lessons in solfa to the very chapel master of the primate. You see, he began before he had teeth. His father had the same position before him, and as the boy showed such talent, it was very natural that he should succeed his father when the latter died. And what a touch he has, God bless him! He always plays well, always, but on a night like this he is wonderful. He has the greatest devotion to this Christmas Eve Mass, and when the host is elevated, precisely at 12 o'clock, which is the time that our Lord came into the world, his organ sounds like the voices of angels. But why need I try to tell you about what you are going to hear tonight? It is enough for you to see that all the elegance of Seville, the very archbishop included, comes to a humble convent to listen to him. And it is not only the learned people who can understand his skill that come. The common people, too, swarm to the church and are still as the dead when Maese Perez puts his hand to the organ. And when the host is elevated, then you can't hear a fly. Great tears fall from every eye, and when the music is over, a long-drawn sigh is heard, showing how the people have been holding their breath all through. But come, the bells have stopped ringing and the Mass is going to begin. Hurry in, this is Christmas Eve for everybody, but for no one is it a greater occasion than for us. So saying, the good woman who had been acting as cicerone for her neighbour pressed through the portico of the convent of Santa Ines, and elbowing this one and pushing the other, succeeded in getting inside the church, forcing her way through the multitude that was crowding about the door. The church was profusely lighted. The flood of light which fell from the altars glanced from the rich jewels of the great ladies, who, kneeling upon velvet cushions placed before them by pages, and taking their prayer books from the hands of female attendants, formed a brilliant circle around the chancel lattice. Standing next to that lattice, wrapped in their richly coloured and embroidered cloaks, letting their green and red orders be seen with studied carelessness, holding in one hand their hats, the plumes sweeping the floor, and letting the other rest upon the polished hilts of rapiers or the jewelled handles of daggers, the 24 knights, and a large part of the highest nobility of Seville, seemed to be forming a wall for the purpose of keeping their wives and daughters from contact with the populace. The latter, swaying back and forth at the rear of the nave, with a noise like that of a rising surf, broke out into joyous acclamations as the Archbishop was seen to come in. That dignitary seated himself near the high altar under a scarlet canopy, surrounded by his attendants, and 3 times blessed the people. It was the time for the Mass to begin. Nevertheless, several minutes passed before the celebrant appeared. The multitude commenced to murmur impatiently. The knights exchanged words with each other in a low tone, and the Archbishop sent one of his attendants to the sacristan to inquire why the ceremony did not begin. "Maese Perez has fallen sick, very sick, and it will be impossible for him to come to the midnight Mass." This was the word brought back by the attendant. The news ran instantly through the crowd. The disturbance caused by it was so great that the chief judge rose to his feet, and the officers came into the church to enforce silence. Just then a man of unpleasant face, thin, bony, and cross-eyed, pushed up to the place where the Archbishop was sitting. "Maese Perez is sick," he said. "The ceremony cannot begin. If you see fit, I will play the organ in his absence. Maese Perez is not the best organist in the world, nor need this instrument be left unused after his death for lack of anyone able to play it." The Archbishop nodded his head in assent, although some of the faithful, who had already recognised in that strange person an envious rival of the organist of Santa Ines, were breaking out in cries of displeasure. Suddenly, a surprising noise was heard in the portico. "Maese Perez is here! Maese Perez is here!" At this shout, coming from those jammed in the door, everyone looked around. Maese Perez, pale and feeble, was in fact entering the church, brought in a chair which all were quarrelling for the honour of carrying upon their shoulders. The commands of the physicians, the tears of his daughter, nothing had been able to keep him in bed. "No," he had said, "this is the last one. I know it, and I do not want to die without visiting the organ again, this night above all, this Christmas Eve. Come, I desire it, I order it, come to the church." His desire had been gratified. The people carried him in their arms to the organ loft. The Mass began. 12 struck on the cathedral clock. The introit came, then the gospel, then the offertory, and the moment arrived when the priest, after consecrating the sacred wafer, took it in his hands and began to elevate it. A cloud of incense filled the church in bluish undulations. The little bells rang out in vibrating peals, and Maese Perez placed his aged fingers upon the organ keys. The multitudinous voices of the metal tubes gave forth a prolonged and majestic chord, which died away little by little, as if a gentle breeze had borne away its last echoes. To this opening burst, which seemed like a voice lifted up to heaven from earth, responded a sweet and distant note, which went on swelling and swelling in volume until it became a torrent of overpowering harmony. It was the voice of the angels, traversing space and reaching the world. Then distant hymns began to be heard, intoned by the hierarchies of seraphim, 1,000 hymns at once, mingling to form a single one, though this one was only an accompaniment to a strange melody which seemed to float above that ocean of mysterious echoes, as a strip of fog above the waves of the sea. One song after another died away. The movement grew simpler. Now only 2 voices were heard, whose echoes blended. Then but one remained, and alone sustained a note as brilliant as a thread of light. The priest bowed his face, and above his grey head appeared the host. At that moment the note which Maese Perez was holding began to swell, and an explosion of unspeakable joy filled the church. From each of the notes forming that magnificent chord a theme was developed. and some near, others far away, these brilliant, those muffled. One would have said that the waters and the birds, the breezes and the forests, men and angels, earth and heaven were singing, each in its own language, a hymn in praise of the Saviour's birth. The people listened, amazed and breathless. The officiating priest felt his hands trembling, for it seemed as if he had seen the heavens opened and the host transfigured. The organ kept on, but its voice sank away gradually, like a tone going from echo to echo, and dying as it goes. Suddenly a cry was heard in the organ loft, a piercing, shrill cry, the cry of a woman. The organ gave a strange, discordant sound like a sob, and then was silent. The multitude flocked to the stairs leading up to the organ loft, towards which the anxious gaze of the faithful was turned. "What has happened? What is the matter?" one asked the other, and no one knew what to reply. The confusion increased. The excitement threatened to disturb the good order and decorum fitting within a church. "What was that?" asked the great ladies of the chief judge. He had been one of the first to ascend to the organ loft. Now, pale and displaying signs of deep grief, he was going to the archbishop, who was anxious, like everybody else, to know the cause of the disturbance. "What's the matter?" "Maese Perez has just expired." In fact, when the first of the faithful rushed up the stairway and reached the organ loft, they saw the poor organist falling face down upon the keys of his old instrument, which was still vibrating, while his daughter, kneeling at his feet, was vainly calling to him with tears and sobs. "Good evening, my dear Donna Baltasara. Are you also going tonight to the Christmas Eve Mass? For my part, I was intending to go to the parish church to hear it, but what has happened? Where is Vincente going, do you ask? Why, where the crowd goes. And I must say, to tell the truth, that ever since Maese Perez died, it seemed as if a marble slab was on my heart whenever I go to Santa Ines. Poor dear man, he was a saint. I know one thing, I keep a piece of his cloak as a relic, and he deserves it. I solemnly believe that if the archbishop would stir in the matter, our grandchildren would see his image amongst the saints on the altars. But of course he won't do that. The dead and absent have no friends, as they say. It's all the latest thing nowadays, you understand me?" "What? You do not know what has happened?" "Well, it's true you are not exactly in our situations. From our house to the church, and from the church to our house, a word here and another one there on the wing, without any curiosity whatever, I easily find out all the news. Well then, it's a settled thing that the organist of San Roman, that squint-eye who is always slandering other organists, that great blunderer who seems more like a butcher than a master of solfa, is going to play this Christmas Eve in Maese Perez's old place. Of course you know, for everybody knows it, and it is a public matter in all Seville, that no one dared to try it. His daughter would not, though she is a professor of music herself. After her father's death she went into the convent as a novice. Her unwillingness to play was the most natural thing in the world. Accustomed as she was to those marvellous performances, any other playing must have appeared bad to her, not to speak of her desire to avoid comparisons. But when the sisterhood had already decided that in honour of the dead organist, and as a token of respect to his memory, the organ should not be played tonight, here comes this fellow along, and says that he is ready to play it. Ignorance is the boldest of all things. It is true the fault is not his, so much as theirs who have consented to this profanation, but that is the way of the world. But I say, there's no small bit of people coming. Anyone would say that nothing had changed since last year. The same distinguished persons, the same elegant costumes, the crowding at the door, the same excitement in the portico, the same throng in the church. Alas, if the dead man were to rise, he would feel like dying again to hear his organ played by inferior hands. The fact is, if what the people of the neighbourhood tell me is true, they are getting a fine reception ready for the intruder. When the time comes for him to touch the keys, there is going to break out a racket made by timbrels, drums, and horse fiddlers, so that you can't hear anything else. But hush! There's the hero of the occasion going into the church. Goodness! What gaudy clothes! What a neckcloth! What high and mighty airs! Come, hurry up. The Archbishop came only a moment ago, and the Mass is going to begin. Come on, I guess this night will give us something to talk about for many a day. Saying this, the worthy woman, whom the reader recognises by her abrupt talkativeness, went into the church of Santa Ines, opening for herself a path in her usual way by shoving and elbowing through the crowd. The ceremony had already begun. The church was as brilliant as the year before. The new organist, after passing between the rows of the faithful in the nave and going to kiss the Archbishop's ring, had gone up to the organ loft, where he was trying one stop of the organ after another with an affected and ridiculous gravity. A low, confused noise was heard coming from the common people clustered at the rear of the church, a sure augury of the coming storm, which would not be long in breaking. "He is a mere clown," said some, "who does not know how to do anything." He is an ignoramus," said others, "who, after having made a perfect rattle out of the organ in his own church, comes here to profane Maese Perez's." And while one was taking off his cloak so as to be ready to beat his drum to good advantage, and another was testing his timbrel, and all were more and more buzzing out in talk, only here and there could one be found to defend even feebly that curious person whose proud and pedantic bearing so strongly contrasted with the modest appearance and kind affability of Maese Perez. At last the looked-for moment arrived, when the priest, after bowing low and murmuring the sacred words, took the host in his hands. The bells gave forth a peal like a rain of crystal notes, the transparent waves of incense rose, and the organ sounded. But its first chord was drowned by a horrible clamour which filled the whole church. Bagpipes, horns, timbrels, drums, every instrument known to the populace, lifted up their discordant voices all at once. The confusion and clangor lasted but a few seconds. As the noises began, so they ended altogether. The second chord, full, bold, magnificent, sustained itself, pouring from the organ's metal tubes like a cascade of inexhaustible and sonorous harmony. Celestial songs like those that caress the ear in moments of ecstasy, songs which the soul perceives but which the lip cannot repeat, single notes of a distant melody, which sound at intervals, borne on the breeze, the rustle of leaves kissing each other on the trees with a murmur like rain, trills of larks which rise with quivering songs from among the flowers like a flight of arrows to the sky, nameless sounds, overwhelming as the roar of a tempest, fluttering hymns which seemed to be mounting to the throne of the Lord like a mixture of light and sound, all were expressed by the organ's 100 voices, with more vigour, more subtle poetry, more colouring than had ever been known before. When the organist came down from the loft, the crowd which pressed up to the stairway was so great, and their eagerness to see and greet him so intense, that the chief judge, fearing, and not without reason, that he would be suffocated among them all, ordered some of the officers to open a path for the organist, with their staves of office, so that he could reach the high altar where the prelate was waiting for him. "You perceive," said the Archbishop, "that I have come all the way from my palace to hear you. Now, are you going to be as cruel as Maese Perez? He would never save me the journey by going to play the Christmas Eve Mass in the cathedral." "Next year," replied the organist, "I promise to give you the pleasure, since, for all the gold in the world, I would never play this organ again." "But why not?" interrupted the prelate. "Because," returned the organist, endeavouring to repress the agitation which revealed himself in the pallor of his face, because it is so old and poor, one cannot express oneself on it satisfactorily." The Archbishop withdrew, followed by his attendants. One after the other, the litters of the great fold disappeared in the windings of the neighbouring streets. The group in the portico scattered. The sexton was locking up the doors when 2 women were perceived, who had stopped to cross themselves and mutter a prayer, and who were now going on their way into Duenas Alley. "What would you have, my dear Donna Baltasara?" one was saying. "That's the way I am. Every crazy person with his whim. The barefooted Capuchins might assure me that it was so, and I would not believe it. That man never played what we have heard. Why, I have heard him 1,000 times in San Bartolome, his parish church. The priest had to send him away when he was so poor a player. You felt like plugging your ears with cotton. Why, all you need is to look at his face, and that is the mirror of the soul, they say. I remember as if I was seeing him now, poor man. I remember Mese Perez's face, nights like this, when he came down from the organ loft after having entranced the audience with his splendours. What a gracious smile, what a happy glow on his face. Old as he was, he seemed like an angel. But this creature came plunging down as if a dog were barking at him on the landing, and all the colour of a dead man, while his... Come, dear Donna Baltasara, believe me, and believe what I say. There is some great mystery about this." Thus conversing, the two women turned the corner of the alley and disappeared. There is no need of saying who one of them was. Another year had gone by. The abbess of the convent of Santa Ines and Mese Perez's daughter were talking in a low voice, half hidden in the shadows of the church choir. The penetrating voice of the bell was summoning the faithful. A very few people were passing through the portico, silent and deserted this year, after taking holy water at the door, were choosing seats in a corner of the nave, where a handful of residents of the neighbourhood were quietly waiting for the Christmas Eve Mass to begin. "There, you see," the Mother Superior was saying, "your fear is entirely childish. There is no one in the church. All Seville is trooping to the cathedral tonight. Play the organ and do it without any distrust whatever. We are only a sisterhood here. But why don't you speak? What has happened? What's the matter with you?" "I am afraid," replied the girl in a tone of the deepest agitation. "Afraid? Of what?" I do not know. Something supernatural. Listen to what happened last night. I had heard you say that you were anxious for me to play the organ for the Mass. I was proud of the honour, and I thought I would arrange the stops and get the organ in good tune as to give you a surprise today. Alone I went into the choir and opened the door leading to the organ loft. The cathedral clock was striking just then. I do not know what hour, but the strokes of the bell were very mournful, and they were very numerous, going on sounding for a century, as it seemed to me, while I stood as if nailed to the threshold. The church was empty and dark. Far away there gleamed a feeble light, like a faint star in the sky. It was the lamp burning on the high altar. By its flickering light, which only helped to make the deep horror of the shadows more intense, I saw, Mother, do not believe it, a man. In perfect silence, and with his back turned towards me, he was running over the organ keys with one hand while managing the stops with the other. And the organ sounded, but in an indescribable manner. It seemed as if each note were a sob smothered in the metal tube, which vibrated under the pressure of the air compressed within it, and gave forth a low, almost imperceptible tone, yet exact and true. The cathedral clock kept on striking, and that man kept on running over the keys. I could hear his very breathing. Fright had frozen the blood in my veins. My body was as cold as ice, except my head, and that was burning. I tried to cry out, but I could not. That man turned his face and looked at me. No, he did not look at me, for he was blind. It was my father. Nonsense, sister. Banish these fancies with which the adversary endeavours to overturn weak imaginations. Address a paternoster and an Ave Maria to the Archangel, St. Michael, the captain of the celestial hosts, that he may aid you in opposing evil spirits. Wear on your neck a scapulary which has been pressed to the relics of St. Pacomio, the counsellor against temptations, and go quickly and sit at the organ. The Mass is going to begin, and the faithful are growing impatient. Your Father is in heaven, and thence, instead of giving you a fright, will descend to inspire his daughter in the solemn service." The prioress went to occupy her seat in the choir in the midst of the sisterhood. Maese Perez's daughter opened the door of the organ loft with trembling hand, sat down at the organ, and the Mass began. The Mass began and went on without anything unusual happening until the time of the consecration came. Then the organ sounded. At the same time came a scream for Maese Perez's daughter. The Mother Superior, the nuns, and some of the faithful rushed up to the organ loft. "Look at him! Look at him!" cried the girl, fixing her eyes, starting from their sockets, upon the seat from which he had risen in terror. She was clinging with convulsed hands to the railing of the organ loft. Everybody looked intently at the spot to which she directed her gaze. No one was at the organ, yet it went on sounding like the songs of the archangels in their bursts of mystic ecstasy. "Didn't I tell you 1,000 times, if I did once, dear Donna Balthazara? Didn't I tell you there is some great mystery about this? What? Didn't you go last night to the Christmas Eve Mass? Well, you must know anyhow what happened. Nothing else is talked about in the whole city. The Archbishop is furious, and no wonder. Not to have gone to Santa Ines, not to have been present at the miracle, and all to hear a wretched clatter. That's all the inspired organist of San Bartolome made in the cathedral, so persons who heard him tell me. Yes, I said so all the time. He never could have played that. It was all a lie. There is some great mystery here. What do I think it was? Why, it was the soul of Maese Perez." And that is the end of that. Just as people are disappearing.